Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Om Ganana Tva Ganapati Bhavamahe Kavyam Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jyeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatha Anah Shunvanoti Vissidasadanam Prano Devi Saraswati Vaje Virvajini Vati Dinama Mitrayavadho Ganeshaya Namaha Saraswatyai Namaha Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Om Gajananam Bodhaganadisevidam Gapittajambo Valasarapakshidam Umasudam Soga Vinashakaranam Namami Vickneswara Padavangajam Om Jnananandamayam Devam Nirmalarspatikakrutим Adharam Sarva Vidyanam Ayagrivam Upasmahe Yasyat Paradavakradhyaya Parishatya Parashatham Vignam Nignam Tisatatam Vishwashremam Tamashraye Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Gurave Sarvalokana Visaje Bhavarugina Nidaye Sarva Vidyana Sri Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Sarveshwararphanamastu Sarvopanishad Ghao Doktha Gopalanandanaha Ithihasas Puranancha Doktha Githamrutat Mahat Harihi Om. Satguru Charanavindabhyam Namo Namaha. Om Tat Sat. Sai Ram, welcome to week 3 of our journey into the Puranas, or the secrets into the Puranas. So, in week 1, I gave you an introduction, and then last week I began with Vishnu Purana and Narada Purana, right, giving you the crux of it. Today we move on to 2 other Puranas called Padma Purana and Garuda Purana. Now both these words have got a strong connection to Vishnu and a strong connection to Narada, right? Padma basically means lotus, and Garuda, as you know, is the Vahana of Lord Vishnu. And it is not uncommon, for gods within the Hindu pantheon to have their respective Vahanas. Like I've said in my, Hinduism talks before, the Vahanas are symbolic of qualities. And the fact that, your Ishtadeva, whoever that may be, rides a specific Vahana means those qualities have been controlled or mastered, as a result of which you are fit to carry the Lord. So the vehicle, which is whether it is Garuda or whether it's Rishabha or whether it's Simha, or whether it's Mayura, all the different Vahanas, right? Whether it's a peacock for Lord Subramanya, Rishabha, the bull for Lord Shiva, Garuda for Lord Vishnu, Mushika for Lord Ganesh, the lion for Shakti, like that. The vehicle basically represents your mind. And if you look at those animals, they all have negative qualities. So if the mind can get rid of all the negative qualities, then that mind verily becomes the vehicle on which the God will ride. Very simple. So the symbolism is then exported to practical living, right? So Padma is the lotus. And as I've always said, right, the lotus has a distinct feature in that it can grow in the most dirtiest of muddiest of waters, but despite its surroundings, it will come out and stand out and blossom beautifully. And amidst all the muck and dirt, one can clearly see the beauty of the blossoming lotus. So in life, we must aspire to become like the lotus. We are surrounded by all sorts of negativities, which befalls us in different ways, different times. But like the lotus, we should not be affected by what is surrounding us. In fact, we should focus on our own beautiful growth and blossom into how that beautiful lotus blossoms and gives beauty, serenity, peace, and wonderment to everyone who looks at it. You should become like that lotus. So Padma Purana and Garuda Purana is what we are looking at today. Okay, let's talk about the Padma Purana first. It's not very big, so it's quite a a small Purana. The encyclopedia is very small. Garuda is much more bigger, so I'll be focusing more on that. Despite that, it's still one of the major Puranas in the 18 Mukhya Puranas, as I've said to you, right? It is dedicated to Lord Vishnu. And there are some parts which also refer to Shiva Shakti, right? The combination power of Shiva Shakti. Now, of course, when it was originally perceived and written, and then subsequently it was written, transliterated into numerous versions. Today, two basic versions exist, one looking at the eastern regions of India and one looking at the western regions of India, right? What was at one point, almost 60,000 verses has now been reduced to about 45 to 50,000 verses, right? Now, the text of the Padma Purana talks about various things. For example, it talks about cosmology, cosmos. It talks about mythology. It talks about genes, genealogy. One of the things it speaks about is how the Kauravas, were formed. The 100 Kauravas, right? It was not by natural birth. So it talks about genealogy. It also talks about geography, the holy rivers, the different seasons, basic, pilgrimage-related temples, numerous sites in India, right? Specifically, the Padma Purana makes reference to one Brahma temple in Rajasthan, a place called Pushkar. So it's called Pushkarani Brahma, right? As you know, Brahma does not have any temples dedicated to him. And when I talk to you about the Shiva Purana, I'll be telling you that story of why Brahma does not have temples dedicated to him. But Padma Purana itself, apart from making references to that one Brahma temple, it also talks about the different versions of the Rama and Sita, Ramayana, which is quite distinct from Valmiki's version. When I did Ramayana with you, I spoke about Valmiki Maharishi's version of Ramayana. There are different versions. So while the main plot may be the same, but the way in which they have, rallied around that plot and the subplots may be different. And Padma Purana gives you a different version of that. Apart from that, it also talks about the different festivals dedicated to Lord Vishnu. One of the things it talks about is, Vaikunda, the Lord's abode. It also talks about Kailasha, where Lord Shiva's abode is. And then, what surprised me was in my research, I found that it talks a lot about ethics, hospitality, right? And how you should treat your guests. They say, Matru Devo Bhava, Pitru Devo Bhava, Acharya Devo, Aditi Devo Bhava. Aditi is all your guests. So Padma Purana basically says how you should treat your guests, right? It also talks about yoga, the Yoga Sastras. And finally, there's one portion that is dedicated to theosophical discussion about the Atman, the soul, Advaitam, Moksha, things like that. It talks about that. Like I said, it's more of a storytelling Purana. This one, it goes back to about the 4th century to the 15th century CE, although there are some records that say it goes back to 750 to 1000 CE. But like I always say, you don't have to worry about exactly when. For you, the important thing is what lesson can I take from this and how can I use this information to improve my own level of spirituality, right? So that's what you got to look for. Not just in this Purana, in every Purana, right? Now, the Purana itself has got 5 khandas, right? One of the major essentials. And that has been translated more into the Bengal region, so in Bengali, if you like. The second major different ascension, traced back to the western parts of India, has 6 khandas. One has 5 khandas, one has 6 khandas. That's why I said earlier, 2 versions, one for East region and one for West region, right? This is the post British colonial Indian era, right? It was developed after that. Many of these wonderful literature got destroyed during the British occupation of India. But some parts of it were salvaged, and then those parts were used to, write a fuller body of knowledge and things like that. So that's why you have different versions, because the original version, does not exist or does not exist in its entirety, right? Now, the Padma Purana is known as a Sattva Purana. Sattva comes from the 3 gunas, right? Sattvic, Rajasic, and Tamasic. So one which represents goodness and purity, right? So the Padma Purana is categorized as one falling into. So you see, there are 18 Puranas, right? And there are 3 gunas. So 6 of those will fall into the Sattva, 6 will fall into the Rajasic, and 6 will fall into the Tamasic. So Padma Purana is one that falls within the Sattva Purana category. I said one of the main focus is the Brahma temple in Rajasthan, called in a place called Pushkar. That is why if you go to Tirupati, the temple in Tirupati, they have a lake, right? A little lake, man-made lake up there on the hills called Pushkarni. So the tirtham from there, is very holy. It's taken and the abhishekam, or the process of absolution, is done with this tirtham, Pushkarani tirtham. So even in the Vishnu Sahasranama and some of the chantings that is done there, the Pushkarani comes quite often there. So in the eastern region, right, in the Bengal region, the recension consists of 5 khandas. So Shrishti Khanda, Bhumi Khanda, Swarga Khanda, Pathala Khanda, and Uttara Khanda, 5. But if you take the later recension, 1 extra khanda or chapter was added called Adi Khanda. The others remain the same. Adi Khanda, also known as Swarga Khanda in some of the later printed editions. So all of this speaks about, for example, the Bhumi Khanda talks about Bhumi, the Brahma Khanda talks about Brahma's role in creating the Bhumi, like that. Shrishti Khanda is the sustenance, right? Patala Khanda is the dissolution of it all. So, there are 18 chapters in the first Khanda, and then there are, 14 chapters in the second, like that. Each chapter has got different, so each Khanda has got different chapters within itself. So the first Khanda is Adi Khanda, right? It talks about Brahma and some history about how Brahma was really born. And if you see some of the ancient pictures, you will see a picture of a lotus coming out of the Navi of Lord Vishnu, who's in Ananta Shayana pose. Now that Padma is what this Padma Purana is all about, how Brahma came from the Padma, hence Padma Purana. The second part is called Bhumi Khanda. It speaks about the different legends, and then that is connected to pilgrimage, right? How those legends became legends. The Swarga Khanda talks about cosmology, the rivers, geographical dispositions, the fourth Brahma Khanda talks about Vishnu, his greatness, his role in sustaining the three worlds, the Bhuloka, Bhuvaloka, and Swaloka, and also talks about the greatness of Tulasi. That is why Tulasi is used as a worship item for Lord Vishnu, just like Bilva is used for Lord Shiva. So Padma Purana makes reference to why Tulasi is used, right? And it talks about, the rituals related to Tulasi. Tulasi itself has got a book on its own, right? Why it has been given that place. Pathala Khanda, the last text talks about Rama, obviously Rama as one of the Dashavatars of Lord Vishnu, right? And presents, like I said, a story that is slightly different from Valmiki's version. So the Padma Purana basically talks about the 14 lokas, 7 lokas upwards, 7 lokas downwards, right? And that will take us nicely into the Garuda Purana. 7 lokas upwards, it's talking about the Bhuloka, Bhuvaloka, Swaloka, Mahaloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, and Satyaloka, 7. Then the 7 down ones is talking about Athala Loka, Vitala Loka, Suthala Loka, Talatala Loka, Mahatala Loka, Rasatala Loka, and Pathala Loka. 7 levels of going downwards and several levels of going upwards. So where you go depends on how much karma you've accumulated in this life, so upwards or downwards. So if you go right down, then, how you accumulate future karmas, you can be ascended upwards and then you can go up. So everybody is given an equal chance, right? Uttarakhanda is how it all comes together, the legend, the mythology, the Atman, the Dvaitam, Dvaitam to Advaitam, and then finally Moksha. And I said within that, there is some discussion of ethics and hospitality to guests, right? So that is basically Padma Purana, right? In a gist. But there are other records that talk about Padma Purana in a different title. For example, in some parts in Jainism and in Buddhism, they are called Padma Charitra, right? Which is basically Padma Purana, right? So in some parts of Tibet, they call Balabhadra Purana. And then they also call Bhattaraka Chandakriti Purana. And then they call the Somadeva Padma Purana. So it's all different, or Dharmakriti Padma Purana. It's all different references to the same thing in different parts of India or different parts out of India, right? Or what's the main teaching of Padma Purana? If you ask what's the main teaching of Padma Purana, you see, Padma Purana talks about the three murtis. It talks about Brahma as the creator. It talks about Vishnu as the preserver. And it talks about Shiva as the annihilator. So if you take the concept of God, God, Brahma is the G, the generator, right? The creator, right? Vishnu is the O. O is for the organizer, the sustainer, right? The preserver. And D is Shiva, the destroyer, the annihilator. Now, what does he destroy? Destroy here, as I said before, not in the physical sense of the word destroy. Destroy here, destroy all your negativities, negative thoughts, negative words, negative actions. That's what he's destroying, right? So In the beginning, it says, because there was a will, on the part of the divine energy to create a world, right? And then the world should be managed properly. So the threefold concept of Trimurti was created, right? So in order to produce the world, the Supreme Spirit emanated from the right side of this body, and that was Brahma. In order to preserve the universe, from the left side of body came Vishnu. And in order to, maintain the balance, destroy the bad, keep the good up, that sort of thing, from the middle came Lord Shiva. So Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva in the middle. So some people worship Brahma, some people worship Shiva, some people worship Vishnu. But yet the Padma Purana says, do not be fooled by these external forms, for the intelligent ones will worship the divine energy that is manifested in the form of Brahma, in the form of Vishnu, in the form of Shiva. Collectively, they are one. That is the main teaching of Padma Purana. Now, Garuda Purana is a completely different story, right? Again, it goes back to BCE. Earlier I said to you, Padma Purana was in the CE, right? This is BCE, 900 BCE, 850 to 1000 BCE, it goes back to that sort of era. The Garuda Purana is another Purana that is classed in the Sattva category, right? And men are also falling into these three gunas, isn't it? The mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance. Sattva, Rajasic, and Tamasic, right? Sattvic, Rajasic, and Tamasic. And I covered this in good depth when I did Bhagavad Gita with you. There's one chapter purely on these gunas. So how you live will determine what happens at the time of your death, right? So 6 Puranas, like I said earlier, goes into the Sattva category. 6 Puranas go into the Rajas category, and 6 Puranas go into the Tamasic category. That verily defines how the 18 Puranas are classified. Okay, basically the Garuda Purana is Lord Vishnu's gift. Gift to whom and for what? Lord Vishnu's gift to Garuda as a recognition of Garuda's bhakti, right? So they had a conversation, and that is the conversation that is reproduced by Garuda to Maharishi Vyasa. And then the rest is, as you know, is written, what is perceived, right? Smriti, and what is heard, Shruti. That's how the knowledge has been given all through. So why did Lord Vishnu give Garuda this gift of a conversation and said, ask? He just said, ask, right? So you should have the intelligence to ask an intelligent question to get the right sort of response. Because when they say ask and you ask, they will give the response to what you ask. So if you ask for Rajasic based things, you will get Rajasic. You ask for Tamasic based things, you will get Tamasic. You ask for Sattvic based things, you get Sattvic. Right? So that is why sometimes, when you see these stories, when they ask you, ask whatever you want, you say, no, don't want anything. Okay. Even that is wanting something. Not wanting anything is also a want, isn't it? Anyway, so Garuda's bhakti was unquestionably, consistent throughout. And once Vishnu's feet, when he was sitting on Garuda, his feet touched the beak, right? And the Garuda caught the foot of Lord Vishnu, and he started to sing. Garuda is singing. And most of you would have heard this. It's called Garuda Gamana Tava. Garuda Gamana Tava Charana Kamala Miha Manasila Satu Mama Nityam Manasila Satu Mama Nityam Mamata Pamapa Kurudeva Mama Papa Pama Kurudeva. What does that mean? So while holding the feet, right? it is reciting this. It means, O Lord who travels on me. That means it's referring to Vishnu because it's holding Vishnu's foot, isn't it? Let your lotus feet always be in my grasp and let it shine in my mind. Then he says, Mamata papama kurudeva. That means, oh Lord, remove all my sufferings. Mama pa papama kurudeva. That means remove all my sins. Fantastic. I mean, if you just go to YouTube and put, Garuda Gamana and listen to it, it is a superb rendition, right? I think the Bombay sisters have done a wonderful job, and even MS Supulakshmi, she's done a beautiful job with this. Garuda Gamana tava charana kamala miha manasila satu mama nityam manasila satu mama nityam mama papa mapa kurudeva mama papa ma kurudeva. So when Vishnu heard that, he was so touched by Garuda's bhakti that he says, ask. And then Garuda asks, what is the source of misery in this world? That when man is told about this source of all their miseries, they can do things to come out of it. Right? And the first thing that Vishnu says is, Kitapakshi mriganam cha harau sanyasta chetasam urdhvam eva gathim manyehim punarjnaninam nirnam. What does that mean? He says, good question, Garuda. Even the worms, birds, bees are assured of elevation to the highest perfectional life if they are completely surrendered to the transcendental loving service of God. So he's talking about seva, right? That means committing yourself to the service of God. Hence, Swami's classic saying, service to man is service to God. Love all, serve all, help ever, hurt never. All those things are basically a reflection of this. So, humans are no different. Vishnu is telling, Him punar jnaninam nirnam. He's saying, even human beings, they are no different to these worms, birds, bees, because they are assured of this elevation to the highest perfection of life and finally merging with the Supreme Brahman. But how they live, how they think, how they speak, how they carry themselves, and how they serve me makes the difference. That's the most important thing. So Garuda Purana is divided into two. One is called the Purva Kanda, or the early section, and the other is called the Uttara Kanda, is the later section, right? In some parts, the later section, the Uttara Kanda, is also known as the Prita Kanda, and some books refer to as the Prita Kalpa. Now, all in all, they have about 19 to 20,000 shlokas, right? So it is what Garuda had asked Lord Vishnu, and Garuda had received all this information and then carried this information to Rishi Kashyapya. Kashyapya Maharishi was one of the Sapta Rishis, right? And then this Rishi went and spread it, and then it got, expanded through Vedavyasa in the forest of Naimisharanya. Naimisharanya is a forest which is very famous for lots of things, right? Lots of learning has come out of that. So lots of our books go back. So Garuda Purana has 16 chapters. 16 chapters. So the first chapter talks about the miseries of all the people committing sins in this world, right? Not just in this world, all the three worlds, right? Bhuloka, Bhuvaloka, Swaloka. The second chapter talks about Yama, saying, hey, don't forget, there's one fellow who's looking at you throughout your life, right? He's Yama. And then the third chapter talks about how Yama will come and get you at the time when your time is up, right? Then the fourth chapter talks about different kinds of sins. Look at the date of this book on record, right? Going back to 700 to 1000 years BCE. At that time, they are writing all this and telling, right? Chapter 5 talks about what kind of signs you can get that point out to certain sins. and then the birth that will take place on certain sins having been committed. 6. Then it talks about the gifts of the dying, the rites of the dying, collecting the bones after cremation, why, what, when, how, how many days should you be observing when there is a death in the house. So it talks about 10-day ceremony, 11-day ceremony, and 13-day ceremony, right? So here's something I want to point out about religious injunctions and cultural observations, right? Most of the time these are mixed. They should not be mixed. The Vedic rites, when there is a death, prescribes 11 days, maximum 13 days, right? But in different cultures, in different parts of India, cultural stuff, they do lots of things, and some will do it for 16 days, 21 days, 30 days, and so on and so forth, right? So that's fine. You maintain your culture if you have to, right? But from a Vedic perspective, the ritualistic aspects is quite distinct, right? So it talks about, Garuda Purana talks this, right? I am just giving you the information that I have found in the Garuda Purana, right? So it's not coming from me. I'm just the messenger, as always. It talks about the law of liberation. Finally, it talks about the birth, continuous birth. So the 16 chapters is fantastic. It talks about the Pitu Shraddham. That means the ancestral prayers that I've always spoken about. And it talks about the final city of justice, where you see the king of justice, Dharmaraja, right? So all that, which is basically Shani Bhagwan, he's been given that. That's why Shani rewards you for good and rewards you for bad. And Yama keeps an account of it. So there are 4 things that the Garuda Purana focuses on, right? It talks about life, it talks about death, and it talks about what happens after death. But the great insight that it gives is based on 4 premises. Number 1, why, the vast living of living beings. What is the reason for the vast variety of living beings? Some are born as paupers, some are born with illness, and yet some are born with silver spoons in their mouth. So Garuda Purana tells you this, why some people are born on this, born with that, without this, without that, with this, all of that. Then the second premise it focuses on is life after death, the journey of the soul, death and its aftermath, rebirth, reincarnation. The third thing the Garuda Purana focuses on is the importance of dhana, right? Dhana is charity. And the fourth, it focuses on the significance of the 13 days of mourning, right? 13 days of mourning. So again, that is why you see where if you go to certain people who observe the Vedic traditions, the Vedic rituals, you will see on the occasion of a death, the only thing they read is the Garuda Purana. The Garuda Purana says it should be read at the time of death, or when the death has happened. The Garuda Purana is chanted, right? And not at any time before that. So it focuses on all of this. So I'm going to take all these 4, one each, and talk about it. Right? Firstly, what is the reason for people being born in different classes, with different economic resources, with different health abilities, or the absence of health? Why is that? Well, because everybody who's born, they are born because of the accumulated karmas from past lives, right? And I said karma is just not action. It's action as a result of the thoughts that you have. It's action as a result of the words that you have spoken, and it is action as a result of the deeds that you have done. All this cumulatively will decide where you go in the future, in the next. So even if you are born as a human being, they say, Manusha Janma Durlabham, that means being born as a human being is a great gift. But even then, you are born with either this or not with that, or more of these or less of that. So there is a lot of, imbalance. That's because of the karmic debts that you have. So the life is given to you to live it fully so that you correct all these deficiencies. And by the time you breathe your last, all debts have been dissolved. But is that how people are living? No. They live this life and they collect more debts so that the next life, again, the account has grown, not reduced, the account has grown. So like that, some people are born into families, different families, so they have a chance to go or to transcend to a higher level as opposed to going to a lower level. That's why the great Bhagavad Pada Sri Adi Shankara says, the company you keep reflects your character. And Swami says, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are, isn't it? So the people who have got merits, they are born into a higher noble family and they grow up in that sort of surrounding with that sort of company. And of course, they become more and more benevolent. And of course, they get to a higher stage. But anyone can do that, right? It also talks about life. I told you death and of course the aftermath, right? But you see, one of the fantastic discoveries that I have discovered as a result of researching into this Garuda Purana specifically, right, is that even at that point in time, it had made calculations of where Yamalok is from Earth in terms of distance, right? And even when I did Ramayana, I told you when I did Kishkinda Kanda, I spoke to you about the Hanuman Chalisa and how there is a measure from earth to sun stated in the Hanuman Chalisa, which has been confirmed recently by NASA, right? Or in recent times. In the same way, the Garuda Purana makes lots of measurements of the Yamalok and the distance they need to travel and the time they need to take to travel to get there, right? Now, it also talks about life, how life is formed. The Garuda Purana talks about the science of an anatomy. Talks about the science of an anatomy. It talks about the 9 months of gestation. It talks about the Garbhagraha, the womb, and what happens inside in the first month, second month, third month, fourth month. That is to precision, So the Garuda Purana makes reference to the first month where it says the head and everything in the head is formed. And then the second month, they say the arms and other parts of the body. And then the third month, the nails, the hair, the bones, the skin, the other cavities. The fourth month, the 7 bodily different fluids. And then in the 5th month, they said, that fetus becomes hungry and thirsty, right? And of course, through the umbilical cord, it is fed. In the 6th month, it starts to, move to the left of the womb. In the 7th month, it gains consciousness. And in the 7th month, it's very important. Garuda Purana says in the 7th month, the fetus remembers all its karma generated in all its previous births. And this is why Shankara says in Bhajagovindam, Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam, Punarapi Janani, Jathare Shayanam. Jathare Shayanam means whilst you are in the womb itself, you remember Punarjanmaha, right? Fantastic. So this happens in 7 months. That child can remember all the past karmas that it has done. However, in the 8th and the 9th month, as it gets ready, to bend down and forcibly it comes out with anxiety and painfully, the moment it exits, it loses all the memories that it remembered in the 7th month. Fantastic is that. Now, that was the Garuda Purana saying that. But as per modern science, and there may be many of you who are doctors, medically trained, medically qualified, you will know what I'm talking about here. As per medical science, this is what it says: by the end of the 1st month, the child has a recognizable, or the fetus has a recognizable head, nervous system, and of course the body begins to form with minute limb buds, so they say. By the 2nd month, vital organs, by the 3rd month, kidney. So the same thing that the Garuda Purana has said has been reflected, replicated in modern science. Of course, the wording, the language, and the expression, the phraseology used might be a bit different, but exact reference to what happens in the growth cycle, right? Within the womb. Modern science has confirmed. Right? That's a big thing. Right? And it talks about charity. As I said to you, it talks about charity. Now, I don't know whether you are aware, but when you talk about charity, there are 4 types of charity, right? One is called Nitya Dhana. Nitya Dhana means daily. Then you have another one called Namitika Dhana, which is casual, as and when. Then there is another category called Kamya Dhana. That means you desire a special result. As a consequence of that desire, you go and do some dana, some charity. The 4th one is Vimala. V means to free yourself. Mala means dirt. So freeing yourself from dirt charity, I don't understand that. Okay, let me explain this, right? Vimala Dhana is a dhana you do when you've done some sins and you want to free yourself from the sin. Oh, go and do this or go and do that, then, whatever you've done. So this 4 charities, right? So when you do charity, it always falls into one of this. Most of the time, it's either, Kamya Dhana or Vimala Dhana, it's called, right? But there are some people who do Nitya Dhana, on a daily basis. They do little things here and there, 1 or 2 things here and there. Or sometimes, casually they do something, Namitika Dhana, right? Casual charity done. But one of the things the Garuda Purana says, so when you give charity, it is not the giving that is important, it is to whom you give is far more important. And then once you've decided to whom you give, with what intention you give, will either say you will multiply the yield of good deeds or you will multiply the yield of bad intentions. Karma, right? So that is why the Garuda Purana says there are 3 categories of dana, right? Good. 4 types of dana, but 3 categories of dana called Annadana, which is giving food, Vastradana, which is giving clothes, and Vidyadana, which is giving, educational stuff for school children or children in schools where they don't have that sort of resources. And most of you who know that, all the pujas I do and whatever dakshinas I get, every year when I go to Kashi or when I go to Shabari, these 3 things I do in your name or whoever, the Yajaman is, their names, their family names said, we do Annadhana, at least to 3,000 to 4,000 people. We buy, clothes and give to people who don't have the clothes. And then we go to schools and give them books and writing implements and that sort of thing. So all 3 dhanas are done, right? If you heard, there's a story here that talks about a reference to Karna or Karan, as is known in the north, in Mahabharata. Karna did all types of dana. The only dana that he didn't do as much as he should have done is Annadhana. That is why in the Mahalaya Paksha period, which comes in September, I've explained this before, but I'm just repeating the benefit of those who didn't hear this before from me. The 16-day ceremony, right? Karna actually comes back to earth and every day he feeds, right? This Annadhana. So if in this period, that's one of the reasons why they do this Pitru Shraddham, Pitru Paksha, during the Mahalaya Amavasya period in September time or September, October, crossover transition time. And this is something that Yama keeps an account, yeah? Garuda Purana says, amount of charity you do and with what intention you do those charities, Yama has an account. And this will tell Yama what to do with you when it comes to take you to the netherworld, right? Now, and then, of course, the Garuda Purana also talks about the subtle body. The Garuda Purana says very clearly that when you die, Yama will come, right? The death happens when Yama comes and takes your soul. Only soul it takes, leaving the dead body there, right? But then it takes the soul and puts it in like a waiting room, for the disentanglement process to happen between the body and the soul, right? Because the soul is watching what everybody on earth is doing, what the living, surviving relatives, friends, everybody is doing. So it is given some time to realize that it is no more that body, and its journey is going to continue. See, the attachment is only with the body, it's not with the soul, and it's not for the soul, and you cannot attach to the soul. Understand this. And I've said this before. Every time people do things to a dead body, it is for the pacification of the surviving, that they have done something to release the soul. But from a ritualistic perspective, from a Vedic injunction perspective, you only need to recite the Mahamrityunjaya mantra or read the Garuda Purana in order to release the soul completely, right? So lots of people do lots of things. Different cultures do lots of things. But this is what you should do in the 13 days, and the time is given for people to get used to that. So the Purva Kanda is the beginning part, and then the Prita Kanda is the end part, or the Uttara Kanda, or the Priti Kalpa. And what makes the Garuda Purana unique is the Prita Kanda, right? Which has a detailed description on what happens after death. That's the main focus of the major part of Garuda Purana. And I'm going to spend a few minutes on this. Basically, this Prita Kanda talks about what happens to the soul after death. It says the soul actually lingers around in this 13-day period. That is why you will find in the Brahmin community and in the Kshatriya community and some other communities, they never go beyond 11 or 12 days, right? That another reason is because of the practicalities. If all the Brahmins who are involved in the temples and worship and pujas and rituals, if they take 1 month, and then it's going to impact a lot of things from a religious perspective. So they tend to keep that to about 11, 12 days. What happens is, the soul lingers around, right? And that is why you see in houses where that has happened, they usually put food, or they usually offer drinks. They will say, okay, put all the favorite things that, the deceased likes. So that is there. But it doesn't do anything for the soul. It just allows the soul to see what people are doing, for that period that it is there. And then, of course, the soul gets elevated to the Pitruloka. So it doesn't hang around for more than 13 days, according to the Garuda Purana, right? And this is where they wait for the judgment, where, the book will say what you have done throughout your life, how much punyas you have accumulated versus how much papa you have accumulated. In my Thursday season 2 reflections, 2 days ago, Thursday, I spoke about punya, right? And then next one is, of course, papa, sin, right? Good and bad, basically. So this is where Yama will come and say, this is your history. Now see all that you have done. And you can actually see everything that has taken place in your life, right? Now, of course, even Krishna has said this to Arjuna, right? He says, if you don't do the right thing at the right time, Arjuna, you will face the consequences of all those inactions. So not doing something at the right time, you also get consequences, right? So if you have done or accumulated a lot of sins, then you will go to, I said to you, Athala, Vithala, Sutala, Tala, Tala, Mahatala, Rasatala, and Patala, the 7 levels, and each level. The Garuda Purana is fantastic because it tells you for what type of sin, what type of punishment is available, to that extent of specific detail, Garuda Purana. If you actually read the almanac, it will tell you. 32 types of punishment. I have no time to go into each one of that, right? For liars, for home wreckers, for people who do, different things. They have categorized this. You will find laws in countries giving punishment for certain type of criminal offenses, right? This is exactly what the Garuda Purana says. If you do this, this is what you will face. If you do that, that is what you will face. If you do this, this is what you will face. So they have 32 categories. Definitely, whatever you do will fall into one of these. So that is, purely karmic metaphysics, right? There is no need, actually, if you think of heaven and hell, there is no need. If you live your life in this life, if you do only good, think only good, speak only good, and do only good, which is, some people might think it's impossible, but what I'm saying is it's not impractical. It's very practical, right? Because you have been doing the same thing for so long, you think something new is not possible, because that is called being in your comfort zone. You come out of your comfort zone, you might think, okay, all that I need to do is just think good for everybody, speak good for everybody, and actually do good. Do good whenever you can, right? The heaven hell concept came later, just to tell people if you are good, you go to heaven. If you're bad, you go to hell, right? But if you look at the Garuda Purana, it says the 7 levels of heaven and the 7 levels of hell from a descriptive perspective. And this also has some connotation to, if you look at comparative religion, if you go back to some writings in the 14th century that is based on Christian manuscripts, they also speak about, hell, purgatory, heaven, the kingdom of peace. All those things are there. But that has only come from the 14th century. And I suspect, it is extracted from travelers and writers who have been to India and got all this information about the Puranas. So even if you ill-treat animals, right? Garuda Purana says there is something there for people who ill-treat animals. So everything has, going back to Newton's law of cause and effect, every action has an equal and proportionate reaction, whether that action comes in the form of your thoughts, in the form of your words, or in the form of your actions. Whilst many people are happy to accept Newton's law, but they question karma. Newton is just basically telling karma in, perhaps better expressed words. But the roots are there. It has come from karma. Karma has come from dharma. Dharma has come from Sanatana Dharma. Simple. And of course, with the extracts coming out of Hinduism, like Buddhism, Jainism, we also have that. Sikhism, they also take all those things and present it to in their own way. But the root is going back to. So there's a lot of moral teachings as well in Garuda Purana, right? Garuda Purana does not hold anything back. It divulges all the secrets of what happens when you die. Secrets of the Puranas. Secret of the Garuda Purana is, I tell you everything that is going to happen to you when you die. I also tell you all the different types of punishment that is available if you have done certain things during your lifetime. I will also tell you how the detachment of the soul happens from the physical body after death. To the point of precision, it tells you how and through what means the soul can get out of the body. The soul is inside your body, right? When you die, it comes out. So how does it come out? Does it come out through your hands or through your legs? No, right? It comes out through the eyes, through the ears, through the nose, or through the mouth. No other way, right? It comes out. And this is what Garuda Purana says. It also says, if the forefathers are there, that is why, in the Pitru Shraddham, or when you pray to your Pitrus, you do it for 6 generations, right? That means on your father's side, your father has got both a mom and a dad, so you do for 6 generations, 3 on the father's side, 3 on the mother's side, and then for the mother who's also got a father and a mother, providing both are not alive anymore, another 6 generations. Now, the reason why you do that is when this person dies, these forefathers, the ancestors, they will come and wait to receive this soul and take that soul where it is meant to be. The next level, either upwards or downwards. So meeting with the forefathers. Again, this is stated in the Garuda Purana that happens on the 11th or the 12th day, right? So the Garuda Purana basically talks about rebirth, right? Reincarnation is exactly based on the karmas accumulated in this life, right? And from this is how, the Jyotisha Shastra is born. Astrology is born as a result of this. People can say what your horoscope is, all based on all this, previous imprint of what has happened to you. And there are so many ways in which this can be done. And so you got to go to the right source in order to get genuine information. It also talks about the acceptance of life as a precious gift of God, and therefore, giving gratitude to God and serving His creation because He has given you the birth and given you a chance, the option to live life in a way that your life is beneficial to others. I always say during Abhishekam, when I do Abhishekam, I explain when I'm squeezing the orange onto either the Paduka or the Shivalinga or whatever, idol I'm doing the Abhishekam on, I will explain what is the significance of squeezing the orange and letting the juice fall on the object that is being focused on. So like the orange, you must live your life so that all the goodness inside you is squeezed out for the benefit of others, and you are just left with nothing at the end of the day. Not wanting anything, not desiring anything, not feeling that you are deserving anything, not feeling you are entitled to anything. Then you are fit to reach. That's a simple thing, squeezing lime, but look at the philosophy behind it. Look at the rationale behind it, right? It talks about, anything that you do that is not dharmic is a sin, right? And anything that you do that is not dharmic can relate to any of your relationships, isn't it? Husband to wife, wife to husband, mother to father, father to mother, mother to son, son to father, all this, whatever you do that is not dharmic is actually a sin, papa, right? And it talks about, it doesn't matter whether you are male, female, different age groups and so on and so forth. Anybody, by virtue of their thoughts, words, and actions, can decide whether to accumulate good deed, good karma, or bad karma. So it's a question of choice. It also talks about something called yoga shastras, right? In order for you to get that level of thinking good, speaking good, you engage in yoga shastras, you engage in meditation. But this is where a portion is called Brahma Gita comes in Garuda Purana. Garuda Purana introduces something called Brahma Gita. You heard of Bhagavad Gita. This is Brahma Gita, a small portion, which talks about meditation, self-knowledge, wisdom, and samadhi, right? That's Brahma Gita. Now, the Garuda Purana also talks to you about the science of diseases, right? In fact, in one of the Vedic Rig Veda, there is a hymn dedicated to the virus that has been governing, the world for the last 2 to 3 years, right? Specific mention of a specific mantra to this particular virus, the corona. Garuda Purana says that. So you see, it's the science, like I always say. Now, what are the benefits? What are the benefits of chanting, or benefits of reading, or benefits of listening? Today, all of you are listening. By just listening, you have accumulated good punyas. That is verily stated by the Garuda Purana, right? It allows you to chant, the Garuda mantra. In fact, if you listen to the Garuda Gamana Tava Charana Kamalamiha, that song is good. You can chant all the Vishnu mantras. You should think about doing good deeds and lawful actions more than doing bad deeds or unlawful actions. That is the benefit of engaging with the Garuda Purana. It helps the person from being good to becoming better, to becoming best, right? From great to grand, basically. It also helps to remove fears. Like Garuda with a sharp beak, it picks on all the fears that you have. And you should repeat the same prayer that Garuda said, "O Lord that rides me," right? Let your feet constantly, brighten and embolden my mind. And through that, may you remove all my sufferings. And through that, may you remove all my sins. That can be a prayer that you say every day, but you cannot say the prayer and do things opposite. The law of direction and motion must be parallel and proportionate. It cannot be, the classic example I'll always give is the smoker who goes to the temple, right? And says, "Give me good health, O Lord. Here's my usual Friday tray and a $5 or £5 dakshina to the priest," right? The priest is happy. And then out of the temple, you light a cigarette and you smoke, or you light a cigar or whatever. So the direction and the motion are opposite. If you go and ask God for good health, then the life you live must verily reflect that request. So you should eat healthy, eat a balanced diet, you should exercise, you should not, not have enough sleep and all of that. So when you live life according to those principles, automatically you will get what you ask God. The problem with people not getting what they ask God is they're not doing the right thing. Basically maths, 2 + 2 will give you 4, right? You cannot get any other answer. Like that, if you do the right thing, you get the right result, right? Benefits of Garuda Purana, when studied, when learned, when listened to, it teaches you, to go into yoga, asana, pranayama, meditation, all of that. It teaches you how to treat your guests. It teaches you how to live life with ethics. It tells you how to live this life so that, your journey after this life, death, and then the rebirth becomes much easier. So what happens to you after death is verily governed by how you live, right? And the Garuda Purana says, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, you have the opportunity to reduce your sins if you transform your lifestyle. Transform your mindset, transform your mouth set, and transform your hand set. Change the way you think, change the way you speak, change the way you act. And it says continuous focus on this is bound to give you a place in heaven. Right? That is the Garuda Purana. Next week, I'm going to talk to you about Varaha and Bhagavata Purana. Okay? Anyada sharanam nasti tvameva sharanam mamaha tasmat karunya bhavena raksha Sarveshwaraha Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sai Ram. Om.